amp's always getting guitar signal, and it's always sending from the preamp output to the effects. And the minimal effect setup for me is a long delay and a short delay, short like a chorus length delay, just a few milliseconds. And I don't use multi-effects units for that. I used dedicated delays from the time period that was a cross between analog and digital, where it was possible to have some sine wave modulation onto the length of the delay. And for some reason, they don't make them that way anymore, and I think it's a real shame. But anyway, those delays are set to all effect, that is all delay only. The output of those delays goes to volume pedals, and I use those big metal Ernie Ball volume pedals. They're indestructible, and they stay put on stage pretty well. And we often just Velcro them to a blackboard, and so we can rearrange them according to how the gig changes. But my minimal setup would be one long delay with a volume pedal, a short delay, going to a little passive mixer. Then that goes into a second amplifier, into the effects return or power amp, or it's just the power amp section of the amp. You can use effects return or preamp in, something that if you plug into it, the front controls won't make a difference, except possibly the presence control on some amps is part of the power amp. Anyway, that means you've already got the sound affected by the dry amp's preamp and delayed, and the volume is changed or cut off by the volume pedals. So that normally when I'm playing, there's nothing on except for the dry amp. And if I want some long delay on a note, all I have to do is push down on the pedal for the long delay, and you hear it coming through not the dry amp, but another amp. So it adds to the sound. It doesn't intermodulate with the sound and start changing it. So you get the benefits of being able to add a specific amount, always changeable amount, and you have the ability to cut it off too instantly. Like it's really effective to hold a note, add some delay, and then right when the drummer grabs the cymbal, just to cut off the delay without just making it totally dry. And that's a nice effect too. And even when I use reverb, I do it the same way. Run the reverb all wet through another pedal. And with Purple, I do have a pedal just for reverb, so that if I want some reverb, I can just dial in the amount. And also, like I said, I can dry it up if there's a kick or something or an impact that the band wants to do, and have just be totally dry and dead for a moment. You can do that by just lifting up the pedals. And then sometimes I do a guitar solo where I do a sampling thing into a delay. I use a PCM 42, which has about maybe 5 seconds of delay. And there's a pedal for that. And then there's another pedal that gives me like a metronome clock for that loop, so that I can start it in time. I don't put that through the amplifier. I put that just through the monitors for me to get a clue of what tempo I need to play in order to make the loop come around. Because there are certain sampling delays that'll let you adjust the loop to any length. I just happen to like mine better with a fixed length because it allows me to relayer extra sounds on it more seamlessly than just having a totally dry start with each new sound that I come up with. So if you look at it, there's a whole bunch of pedals, and it looks like, oh my God, there's all this stuff going on. But the vast majority of the time, it's just the guitar straight into the amp. And on my amps, I have a control for switching channels, which basically just switches the gain. Goes from high gain to low gain. And I use that channel switching thing a lot. Somewhat similar. When I'm recording at home, I put different amp heads in the control room and then run a couple speaker wires out into the recording room, I guess, the live room, where the speaker cabinet or speaker cabinets are. And I just grab an assortment of mics, set them up at different places, and just plug them all in. And I don't really worry about which mic is which. because often if you get a preconceived notion about a microphone, you might find yourself wrong. There's an element of luck involved in where getting the mic placement right. So it's really just as good to just throw them up there like you're blind, and then see what you got. Then try moving them around. If you got something that's close and you're having a little bit too much of this or that, then try moving it around. And then I record basically dry. Then, if that doesn't fit the track, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to want some effect on it, like a little bit of slap echo or something, I'll just, use the board to bring it into the effect. And often I'll record it with effect on it, because I don't believe in putting everything off till the mix. To me, if I record a sound and it's too weird, I can re-record it. That's all. It's just not that hard. And that way, I can hear how it's coming along as it goes, rather than saying, well, it sucks now, but it's going to be great in the mix. Because I remember hearing that one a lot when we had producers that were hired by the record company. And I'd just rather hear it as it goes. So that's my approach. Get the sound as dry as I can live with and leave it on there. But if I want an effect on, I'll often just record it with there, especially on the clean stuff. I want to hear it sounding pretty before I move on to the next part. No, I use the Ampeg V4, my Marshall 2555, the 5152, and I have a Mesa Boogie. And actually, a surprise thing is a little Carvin amp. It's one of these trying to copy like the 50s and 60s look, the tweed-looking amp. That thing sounds good. It's a 31 amp, not much power, but it really puts out an interesting sound. Well, it was a conscious decision for me to start picking every note. I discovered that the Hendrixy kind of approach, the really blues-based approach of playing the guitar, would work for guitar riffs. But as I was trying to learn some Bach piece, just when I was trying to teach myself to learn to read music on the guitar, I realized, hey, some of this stuff just... Things like that, they're not hammer-on friendly, you have to find where the note is and pick it, and it doesn't always arrange itself easily. So I thought it'd be better to learn to pick every note and be able to do it to the extent that I didn't think about it or didn't care where the pick ended up. And so my first exercise was just doing 4 notes to a string. Now, that's entirely too symmetrical of an exercise to do much good, but it at least got me started with building the strength. And a better variation of that is 3 notes to a string. One of the reasons it's better is your pick keeps changing directions from down, up, down. Next string is up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So you get practice making the uncomfortable changes. One of the most, I guess, difficult and uncomfortable changes is going, say, up on the A string to down on the D string, or vice versa, where your pick is moving in opposite direction that your hand is. So that's another thing you can practice, just sit there and do exercises where your pick is going in opposite direction. As opposed to doing it the easier way, which is down on the A string, up on the D string, like that. That's the way most people would tend to do it, or both down. Another thing I discovered is that my picking, since I'd spent a lot of my life going, everything being a downstroke, well, guess what needs more work? The upstroke. So it's good for guitarists just to practice picking everything up. You just sit around and play like that for a while, Just try. Like I've said before in these guitar clinics that I give, you don't have to practice the exact same things you would play live. And an example that I thought of was these football players, especially here in Australia. They have to run a lot. I mean, they have to be in shape. So for training, I'm sure they run, Say they run a few kilometers or something. And what if they went into the game and they just started running in circles instead of, worrying about where the ball was or anything? Just because you practice something doesn't mean you have to be an automaton that just does the one scale that you practiced. But the idea of practicing certain technical things is just to make it easier for you to do it effortlessly and not think about it. So improve your upstroke and practice slowly so you can hit every note, so you can pick every note. A lot of people forget that. I'd say that's probably the number one thing that I notice that stands out is guitarists have a problem understanding when they're making a mistake. They don't even hear it. The speed that's not accurate that doesn't count. I mean, okay, if you're at a gig and you just can't quite make the part and you give it your best shot, that's okay. That's a moment in history. It's gone. But when you practice, it should be different. It should be get every note perfect. Then slowly move up the speed once you've got to the point where you can do it effortlessly. Let me turn on this. These arpeggios I like to practice are difficult from the standpoint of picking, but they're really good for your technique because it's basically one note per string. You pick down, up, down, up, down. So almost all your energy is spent changing the position, which string your pick is on. And to keep the alternate picking going, which I think is essential for good accuracy of timing. Because your pick is basically going in an arc all the time. And it's easier to define the moment when you're at the bottom of that arc than it is to press against a string, wait for that string to rebound, move out of the way, and then hope you got a time to where the pick strikes the next string. That would be the sweep method of trying to play arpeggios in time. Normally sweeps are used for kind of a rush or a blur of notes that they're not exactly in time, more than for something that's well defined like a keyboard. Say, that would be a weird song, but I write a lot of weird songs. Something that would just be an intense left-hand keyboard part. A guitar player could double if they were using that alternate picking technique. Every technique has its use and its place. So I'm not saying this is better than that or anything like that. It's just I think it's an ignored technique, largely ignored technique, is the idea of alternate picking arpeggios. So you can also do skips, where you skip a string. First guitarist I knew of that did incorporate fingered harmonics or artificial harmonics was Lenny Breau, and I think he's either used a thumb pick or I think he had a long thumbnail too. It's been a while since I've seen him. He died about maybe 10 years ago, but he was a Canadian jazz guitarist, very innovative, very nice guy too. Something else that matters, if you're a musician too, by the way. And we'd see him at the National Association of Music Merchants. The NAMM show is like the music expo that happens each year. And a lot of musicians come there to demo products for companies. And he was always there doing some kind of concert or something. He would incorporate the idea of alternating a harmonic. Say here, I'm playing a C on the G string, then tapping the harmonic 12 frets above, just touching above the fret wire and picking at the same time. And he would alternate that with a natural note, that is a note on another string that wasn't harmonic. So you could come up with a nice pentatonic scale just by barring the strings. And then he would add hammer-ons and pull-offs to make it to give the illusion that every note was a harmonic, but obviously it wasn't. The harmonic notes would ring while the natural notes on the adjacent strings would be either ringing or being hammered on or pulled off to give even more the illusion that it's a cascade of notes. And that became one of his trademarks. And so another thing that I've taken from that is the idea of inverting chords using one note as a harmonic, the other natural. So we take our G chord with a B on the bottom, a D, and a G. If I play the bottom note, the bottom B, as a harmonic, now I've changed the inversion of the chord. Now the B's on top, and we can't help but hear that as the dominant note. So it kind of, just like a 12-string guitar, it gives you an octave on your lower strings. It gives you an octave up to mix in. It gives you just a different illusion of the chord voicings. And you can make the bottom note of your chord the melody note just by making a harmonic. So that's one of the techniques I use on, well, a lot of things. But I have to thank Lenny Breau for that, and I don't think he gets enough credit. The Dregs, or the Dixie Dregs, started back in, I'm thinking now, maybe 1970. I think 1970 was our first gig. And it was actually a two-person band, Andy West and myself. We did kind of experimental music. We had tape loops of things, and I played some keyboard, and Andy played bass. And between songs, he would be talking, and then I would run around to the back where we had a reel-to-reel tape recorder and another reel-to-reel tape recorder about 10 feet away with a take-up reel for that tape. So one side was recording, and then 10 feet away, the other tape player was playing it back. And I had that looped into a mixer. So as he was talking, I was feeding back what he had said about 10 seconds before, and kept layering and layering and adding on top of that, using sound on sound. And a lot of people thought we were stark, raving, insane lunatics. I remember a concert we did where one guy just totally freaked out. He said it was the weirdest thing he ever saw. Because we had made some electronic music pieces using the most primitive synthesizers around that time. It was even before there were organized patched bass synthesizers that I could get my hands on. So we were using white noise generators, ring modulators, and cutting and editing tape to make this electronic music. Anyway, we added a drummer and became a three-piece band. We recorded a couple years later some demos, but our first actual album was 1975 at the University of Miami. I was graduating there, and every graduating senior got some studio time. They were just building the studio, so I brought the band in, and we played. You know, the guitar was in the elevator shaft because there was no isolation rooms or anything. It was really a live stage that they happened to be putting a 24-track in. We recorded our album just really quick, and I'd saved up some money, and we pressed some copies, and that became our demo. You know, was, hey, here's our album. We had it shrink wrapped, and when we gave it to the record companies, often they would send it back with the shrink wrapping unmolested, saying how they didn't think it was the right kind of music for them. You know, and I'm going, whoa, they got some advanced technology at these record labels. And so I began a collage on my rented apartment. It wasn't a beautiful apartment, so I started putting these rejection letters on the wall, and pretty soon I'd covered a whole wall. And at that point I realized nobody had heard this stuff. The ones that were polite enough to send it back unopened, also with a letter saying that they had listened to it, those were just the result of having a committee of people designed to take stuff and say no. And we realized we're going to have to get out and play more. So we started playing around the country, anywhere we could get to, anywhere we could get gas money. And when we got heard by enough people, there was this confluence of energy. The guys from Allman Brothers and Phil Walden and a couple other musicians all heard us at the same place in Nashville at the same night. And suddenly we had a deal. Now, the instant we had an offer for a record deal, some of those other labels that said that it was the wrong kind of music were interested. It was just, it's just human nature at its finest, the record experience. Anyway, we went through it. We did 6 albums, then broke up, and I did solo albums in the 80s, and then played with Kansas in the late 80s. And all along the way, we occasionally got together with the Dregs and did some projects. And I'd say in the 90s we did several albums and maybe 3 or 4 different tours, just because we like playing together and getting together. And it's not the kind of thing that could financially support people that have families, but it is a great music group. The personalities of everybody are really interesting and entertaining to hang around with, especially for a limited time. We have some. Have you seen the comedian Richard Lewis? He's a kind of a neurotic. He's got this whole neurotic Jewish humor thing, and our keyboard player is exactly like him, and he's a constant source of entertainment. We have the violinist from Mahavishnu Orchestra, Jerry Goodman, who I've enjoyed seeing with Mahavishnu back in the days that they were touring. Rod Morgenstein on drums is a very musical guy, and Dave LaRue, who also plays in my trio, is playing bass, and the keyboard player, T. Lavitz, very natural soloist. He just totally close his eyes and go. So I just love playing with the guys, and audiences still come to the shows. They still support us. I don't know where they come from, but they're still out there. I know they're downloading a lot of songs, too. With the Dregs, we do a lot of, intense jazz rock stuff, but we also do some more laid-back tunes. One of my favorite is Hereafter. When I recorded it, I use a 12-string guitar, so when I do the intro, try to get as many strings ringing as possible. So I kind of made up some voicings that will allow some, like I used the open B string. It gives it a more broad range of octaves to kind of simulate what I had going with the 12-string. After the intro, there's parts that are kind of designed for keyboard that I play on guitar, like. In the same vein, parts of Night Meets Light are also, they work out really well for keyboard, or a little bit of a stretch for guitar, and they're often arpeggiated like. One of my favorite parts of Night Meets Light also is a section where the harmonics take the melody, and we have the bass and drums doing the offbeat accents, and then I basically play them all because I wrote this little part on guitar, and it's a hard section to play, but it sounds really neat when everybody's together. Those kind of really melodic things are a lot of fun for me to play. And some of the stuff is fun to play just doesn't sound good with just guitar because it's me, it's me holding a note. But it's the feel of the band surrounding you and giving you the freedom to solo over it. And like the solo in Night Meets Light or Hereafter is a good example of that, where I can just sit there and hold a note and get some nice feedback or some nice sustain from it. And yeah, just the freedom to improvise. That's one of my favorite things about Deep Purple, too. Well, my initial reaction was, I don't know about this. This could be, I thought the odds were, and I play the odds a lot when I assess the future. I thought the odds were that it was not going to be a great musical move for me. And so both they and I didn't know what it would bring. And so we ended up agreeing to do 4 shows in a short, like a week space, including rehearsals and everything. So I went and met the guys and was really surprised at how, as soon as we started playing, John Lord, I was improvising. We were just jamming. In fact, that's the first thing we did, was just start to jam. John Lord could hear what I was playing and add to it, and that really surprised me and pleased me. And the other guys were just really confident and relaxed, and the time was no problem. It was just like sitting in a big, easy chair. It was just the easiest thing in the world to just play with them. Then, my only fear then became the singer. Well, he's a rock and roll singer. This could be like, just some medieval torture thing. But instead, we went on stage. I think a day after I met them, I was on stage in this huge Coliseum. And Ian puts his arm around me and said, "Come on up to the stage," because I was hanging back, just kind of like, "I'll be in the shadows here if you need me," And so he just says, "Come on up," Basically, what he's telling me is he wants to be part of the band instead of have the band be behind him. And I just love that approach. I love Ian's humor, his double entendre lyrics, everything that he comes up with. I mean, I find some great amusement with. And Roger was the first guy I met. And Roger's the total intelligent, super eclectic listener. He was the guy, I think, that suggested to the band that they look into getting somebody really different from Richie, meaning me. And I came to the conclusion that they were all in the band. They were all picked to be in the band because they were good. They were really good. The band's been through a lot of different versions over the years. And here we were. 4 out of 5 of them were from the Smoke in the Water days, but they kept being in the band because they were really right for it. To my surprise, it was working out really well. And I was luckily in a position where I didn't have to do anything. I was making a living doing my own thing. And, as much as I wanted to, or I could do solo shows or go back to, doing classical guitar gigs or whatever. There was a lot of possibilities. But suddenly this just seemed like actually a great opportunity to have fun playing. And that's something that I sort of, I haven't been having as much of sometimes. When I do these classical guitar gigs, it's like such an intense thing. The sound's perfect. Any breath that's wrong, is obvious to the whole seated theater full of people. And I don't know, it's really joyful and relaxing and fun to play with Deep Purple. Something I've always wanted to do. Playing with John Lord makes me, it's a challenge. It's great because one of the things we do every night is John will just start playing chords. And it's before one of several tunes that will have this. He'll start playing chords, and at some point, there's no telling exactly when. I'm just supposed to know and feel when I should come in. And then I do. And as I start playing a melody, he plays different chords according to what he thinks I'm going to hit next. And I never know if it's going to be a relative chord or if it's going to be a key change chord. And so we both really have to use mental telepathy and use our ears. Because the instant he hits that chord, I've got to play a note that fits. And not only note that fits, but continue it with the melody. It's that kind of thing. I love doing that. It's sort of the musician equivalent of living on the edge. You know, you're really taking a chance. You know, it sounds like something that's planned out to the people in the audience, which is great. I don't really care if they think it's planned out or not, but just the fact that we're doing it and it's spontaneous and it's really kind of sticking your neck out. I just love that. And John is so good at that. He can tell. Even sometimes I can even imply where I'm going with the melody, and he'll get it. Very few keyboard players I've ever played with in the jazz arena can think that far ahead. He's really, really special talent. Well, his organ sound, it's something I always loved about Deep Purple. Just heavy B3, and a lot of those recordings he did with playing through a guitar amp, of course, really appealed to me because it's like power chords or something. So I use a little bit different amp as a result of that. That's why I use the 5150. It seems to have a better mix with his organ than the amps that I use with Steve Morse Band or Dregs, which are regular Marshalls. And I don't always feel a need to cut through the organ. I like to blend with the organ a lot. But I've never been out front for one of our shows, so I can't say exactly how it is. I know how it is in the studio when we play live and we listen back. Because we try to have sounds that are compatible, but let him have a little bit more mid-range with the organ and me have a little bit more of a spread, which I normally don't do. But with Deep Purple, I have more low and high than I normally would. Sometimes we do, some fast riffs. We do several songs in G, a lot of songs in G. One of that's Mary Long, and also in G, this one. Speaking is just straight up. Trying to think some other stuff that I can do on this guitar. Oh yeah, one of the ones that is I love to play like this. This is an interesting anecdote. I don't know if it's funny. It wasn't funny to me at the time, but it gets funnier as time goes on. We were playing in Kiev, Ukraine, part of the former USSR, and we were getting there on a series of airliners. One was an old chartered Aeroflot, a jet, looked kind of like a 727. And the crew and the equipment were all supposed to go in there. Well, to start with, the baggage door of the plane was not big enough to put the equipment in with the cases. So they started taking, we were coming from maybe Moscow the day before. So in Moscow, they're taking the cases apart and just, cases that would have little delays and pedals and cords and stuff. Now, they're just cords being thrown into this airliner, like in seats and stuff. Delays, amps, guitars, just stuff without cases, being just totally loaded into this ancient, like put out of service because it's not good enough to keep in service airliner. Then the crew saw the plane, and almost every one of them said, "No, I'm not getting in that thing," because there was some of the tires, you could see the cord on them, and they were just convinced that they were gonna die if they got on this thing. And they said, "Sorry, this is below standard." Meanwhile, we'd already gone on another plane, and we were in Kiev, and the crew ended up not going on the plane. The plane goes to Kiev. A bunch of Ukrainians unload it, bring it to the gig. The gig is an outdoor stadium, okay? It was like late summer, and it's just a cold front that's just gone through. It's gotten really cold and windy. The stage is about 200 feet across, and I just got suddenly picked up from the hotel room. "You need to come down to the gig right away." "Why? What's wrong?" I get there. None of my crew is there. All my equipment is scattered in pieces across a 200-foot stage along with everything else. There's people milling around. No one speaks English. I have a T-shirt on and a thin jacket, and it's starting to snow. There's nobody to set up my stuff. There's no power. I have 110 volt stuff. They have 240 volt. There's no transformers. There's nothing. And people the doors are opening. There's people coming in and say, people in broken English saying, "Steve, why are you setting up your equipment?" And I'm going, "I don't know." But because since the crew didn't get on the plane and they just blew it off, they said, "There's no way." So we did the gig anyway, and I had to figure out a way to hook everything up. Well, it took me until 5 minutes before the show to get enough adapters and cords and to find all the stuff, just to put it together. Because I have a bunch of pedals and a rack and 6 cabinets, and I was like, "Oh, give me it with this," and just literally setting it up. And then 5 minutes before the show, I'm totally, completely frozen, and we're supposed to play. And there's movie cameras all around, strategically, like they're going to make bootleg things of this or whatever. And I'm just going, God, this just couldn't be any worse. I couldn't even move my fingers; they were just so frozen. So. One of the crew that did come was there with, it went and got some hot water in a metal thing, and I just put my hands around the hot water. It started to burn my fingers, but I couldn't feel it. So when the pain arrived, getting through the frozen fingers, I said, "Ah!" And then I put a towel around it and then kept doing this, trying to warm it up for now I had 2 minutes left. Hadn't touched my guitar. My fingers are just starting to get unthawed. And then this guy in Ukrainian starts announcing the band. It was just, welcome to hell. It wasn't funny at the time, but now it seems funnier. The reason I became a professional airline pilot was twofold. One was, it was another childhood dream that I thought that would be a great job that I would enjoy. But the other reason was more of a dark thing that I don't really feel happy about telling the world about it, but I'll try. I just really hated the time of the music business as the way I saw it. I felt like, everybody just wanted a clown, somebody to dress up in a certain way and do these kinds of songs, and the whole emphasis on life seemed to be trying to please record companies and MTV, and everybody around me was just behaving like they were marionettes or something controlled by some business. I just lost my appetite for doing that, and I just never wanted to. I wanted to play music just to play music. So when I was a pilot, I fly every day. Flying is part of my life too. But when I was actively seeking employment and got employment as an airline pilot, in my mind it was going to be what I did for the rest of my life, or until I was age 60, when you're forced to retire, so that I could really be free, so that I wouldn't have to face the music business. I always wanted to be in the music, surrounded by music, recording music and playing occasionally with people. But I was very happy to walk away from the music business. Then, after spending a while in another business, I discovered that there's downsides to everything. There's stuff you don't want to do in any kind of job. That's why it's work. That's why they call it work. Like in my job, I love playing with the band. I love playing with Purple, but all the other stuff, the traveling, the waiting, the stress of this, oh my God, we got to go through that. If this didn't work out, we got to hurry up and change this. And spending most of your time not playing is what the work is. That's the WORK that I want to get paid for. The music I'll do for free, but every job has its down point. So I learned that and realized that if I put as much effort into music as I did keeping myself organized as an airline pilot, that I could manage it. And so I did. I only had my one boy, my 10-year-old boy. The other two are stepsons. I didn't know them until they were like 6 and 8. But I used to play a song for my little boy, Kevin. Not with that much distortion, but I did acoustic.
That's good.
And he used to love to just dance around, and he'd smile. Every time I played that, he would smile. there's like I said, there's other issues that come up with electric guitar, and that's controlling the power you have. You know, imagine if you had like a 600 horsepower car and all you had was an on and off switch. You know, no gears, no accelerator, just like 600 horse or nothing. You know, it would be hard to drive, right? So controlling the power you have when you got all that distortion and gain is that's a big part of it. So technique-wise, I found it easier to hold my pick with 2 fingers and a thumb and use this part of my hand to mute the strings that I'm not playing. The heel of my hand and the pinky finger. And I make like a little bridge. And actually, the note that I'm striking is in the arch of that bridge. I don't recommend this for everybody. This is just the way that I do it.
Steve, why do you do sessions like this?
Well, to me, it's something I wish I could have seen as a young player. I was in a little small town in Georgia trying to figure out what rock and roll was all about, listening to records, and that was my only exposure. Going to huge pop festivals where you couldn't even make out the faces of the people sometimes. You could hear it, and that was great. To me, I want people to know what it's like making a living as a musician and the way that you look at things. I want people to know that if you want to play good guitar, you have to be good at cutting your grass. You know, you have to be good at everything. You have to be conscientious in order to be a conscientious guitar player. That everything carries over, and that nothing comes for free.
Can you explain some of the techniques you use for playing tracks like too many notes?
It's A minor, arpeggio, and sextuplets or triplets, or however you want to look at it, depending on if you count double time.